Well, hello guys. This is Nacarelli and a little something new today. I haven't made a video in quite some time, but I just felt compelled to talk about this watch. While my channel, if you call it that, hasn't ever focused on watches, and this is my first kind of review, I'm a prolific watch collector. And if you ever look at any of my other videos, you'll notice various different watches on my wrist at any given moment in time over the last decade plus. But I'm pretty excited, so I felt to dust off the old camera and talk about this guy, because I think this is one of the first videos on this watch. It is Friday. What is this, January? I forget. These watches don't have date. Oh, you know what? We can find out on another watch here. Let's move this guy aside. We're talking about the new Speedmaster that Omega just released. The one that everyone's excited about, the new moon watch with the new bracelet and clasp and the new Master Chronometer movement. We're going to talk about this guy in a minute. Let's put him aside here. But I thought it was fitting, just as this watch was, as they all have been, first watch worn on the moon. Figured I would be one of the first to review this watch. I think I saw somebody actually post a video already, but that's okay. Take out the watch that's currently in here. So it is the 8th of January, as you can see there on the Seamaster. And this watch was just released on Tuesday of this week. So again, one of the firsts. By the time I get this thing uploaded, if I remember how to do that, there'll probably be about 24 of these videos swarming around YouTube. But in any event, I'm really excited. Let's get, we want to talk about this guy. So let's move this aside. Here's the box it comes with. I don't know if anyone remembers the old Speedmaster boxes, but they're pretty big. This one's a little smaller. It's the same kind of aesthetic, but it's definitely smaller. Actually, about the same size as the normal Omega wooden box, but it's still got this texture and these, astronaut buckles that are Velcro. And inside you get a couple channels here, and this lifts out. There's some cards, pictogram, Master Chronometer, etc. I think I just flashed my serial, whatever. Get all this stuff out of the way. And you get the manual and everything else, which I'll have fun reading, but let's get the watch back on the table, shall we? Move you aside here. There we go. Nice little black surface for contrast. So this is the new moon watch, Omega Speedmaster 3861 caliber, that just got released 3 days ago. And it comes with a host of updates. This watch, has been around forever, but it hasn't been updated in the last, 15 years. I remember I had a sapphire sandwich version of this back in 2011, and it's pretty much, I think, aside from the clasp and maybe going to screws in the bracelet, that's pretty much been the same watch they've been running with up until this week. And finally, Omega came out with a watch that's really, I think, fitting of this watch's heritage. So let's talk about, there's a lot of, articles already been posted about this, and anyone who's interested in this watch, watching this video has probably already read it, everything there is to know. So I'm going to just gloss over kind of the major updates. Of course, the, primary major update is the movement. Now, I got the Hesalite version, which I believe is more true to form, but I did try on the sapphire sandwich, and it's just as nice, and you get that nice view of the movement. This one obviously has the solid case back with the engraving. The engraving has been updated in terms of the words. So now it has, in 1965, added to the text there. And then the Master Chronometer coaxial stampings on the very outer edge of the case back. So a little bit more text, obviously, to denote some more of the history, and then obviously the new movement inside. Let's talk about the movement. So it's a 50-hour power reserve, cam mechanism, chronograph movement with the new, well, not new, but Omega's coaxial escapement. I know everyone's going to say, well, no, George Daniels invented it. Okay, whatever, I don't care. But it's got the coaxial escapement that they've been running with for a decade plus. It's obviously now, it's gone a big leap The old movement wasn't even COSC certified, and now they've gone from no certification to the Master Chronometer certification for this new movement, which is both COSC and then obviously METAS, if anyone follows what Omega's been doing with these new Master Chronometer certifications. That just gives you obviously a little bit of a stricter accuracy standard, 0 seconds to plus 5 seconds a day. The 15,000 Gauss anti-magnetism in case you're going through areas that have high electromagnetic fields, or putting it on speakers or cell phones or whatever you read about. It's going to be resistant to those magnetic charges that won't deviate its timekeeping or even magnetize the watch, which is not that big of a deal. So those are just to me some of the most important upgrades to this watch. The other upgrade that I think most people are going to notice and want to talk about, which I'm going to spend a lot of time on, is this bracelet. I don't have an old model here, but the old model had a 20 millimeter lug width. It tapered down to 18, but it had this big end link, kind of the old school Omega end link that was running, the late 90s all the way through the 2000s. That really just made the lug-to-lug diameter pretty wide. And it made a 42 mil watch, which is a pretty sizable watch, even bigger feeling when you were wearing it. The new bracelet has this kind of, it almost feels like a hollow end link. It's not, but kind of in keeping in line with kind of the new Seamaster and a lot of other of their lines like the Planet Ocean. Now they've got this end link that kind of terminates exactly in line with the end of the lugs, and then has this pivoting, whatever you want to call this here, so that it can drape straight down from the lugs. And that allows it to fit much nicer over someone's wrist, especially those who have smaller wrists. The bracelet also tapers from 20 millimeters down to 15. That's a pretty aggressive taper, and when I read that stat, I was curious as to how small it would really get. And again, upon initial review, I've had this for, 6-7 hours now. It's pretty damn small. I don't know if that'll come across on camera, but I thought just as a comparison, I have my Explorer here, a Rolex Explorer, which is a 39 millimeter watch. So we can just kind of compare the sizes here. I don't think it'll show up too different on camera. Obviously, the Explorer is much smaller when I'm holding them and thinner. But the bracelet is 20 millimeters at the lugs, and it tapers down to 16.5, where this goes from 20 down to 15. But I think more interestingly, what catches my attention is the clasp. So on the new Speedy, the clasp is exactly 15 millimeters. It's exactly the same size as the smallest lug here. It's kind of an interesting design. Whereas, the old version, I can pull out the Seamaster over there, the clasp was a little bit bigger than that smallest link, kind of like here on the Explorer. It tapers down to 16.5, but then the clasp itself is a millimeter bigger, so it's actually a 17.5 diameter. By comparison, this feels like a micro machine. And my initial reaction, and I'll be honest, was it's pretty diminutive. Almost kind of toy-like in terms of how just small it is. That definitely takes some getting used to. On the positive side, again, while I'm focusing on it, this new updated clasp is very attractive, very well done. It's a nice design. I know this is the same, essentially, bracelet and clasp design as this guy, which is the Moonshine Apollo 11 50th anniversary watch. So it makes sense that they didn't try to, do anything different. I read maybe somewhere that was 14 mils at the clasp. I could be wrong, but I can't believe they would get any smaller than this. This is it's pretty small, but it feels good, and it's got obviously the Omega's twin button release and their typical clasp setup. Keeping on the bracelet for a minute, the other thing that I noticed when I was handling this one and the Sapphire Sandwich model is this bracelet is, let's start with why it's going to do what I'm going to point out. These links are so small. It doesn't even show up really on camera how small they are. If I could compare it to the link on a Oyster bracelet, it's almost 2 links on the Speedmaster to 1, Oyster link. This is very similar to the Jubilee bracelet in terms of feel. When you're just kind of letting it drape on you. It's got that draping feel, just like a Jubilee bracelet from Rolex. But it's very, and I want to use this word endearingly, it's very flimsy feeling. And I know that's, I think, a design effect here and part of the charm, because it's a modern bracelet. It's solid, and it's, you know, it's not hollow where it's going to stretch. It almost kind of feels like it's been pre-stretched, but it's very flimsy feeling. Very, I hate to say vintage, but it definitely feels like it's from the 60s. Definitely caught me off guard a little bit when I picked up the watch, especially if you use, you know, if you play with the old bracelet model. That bracelet is very solid, very robust feeling, very heavy feeling. This feels very airy, very silky, and also just, again, very, you can hear it. You know, I mean, it twists, it turns, it moves, it feels worn almost already. And again, both models that I play with have that feeling. Now on the wrist, I have a 6.75 centimeter wrist. It feels amazing, like $1 million. I used to have, again, the old model, and this just feels, even though it's a 42 mil and the case is essentially the same, it feels much better on the wrist. One of the most comfortable watches I've ever put on. Probably on par with, you know, the Batman or Pepsi Rolex. Just that, you know, the way the bracelet integrates and feels, it's just great. And this taper, while extreme, you know, it adds to a lot. I mean, the bracelet design itself, in terms of this draping sensation and all these articulated small links, makes it very comfortable, but also then the taper makes it just that much more comfortable with the small clasp. So while it feels small and it looks very small, the feel and the function of it is top notch. So well done to Omega on that. But if you guys handle these in person, you'll see what I mean. It's kind of, it takes you back for a second. The other thing I'll mention is the overall watch feels pretty light. And this bracelet feels, I don't think it's got hollow links at all in there, but it feels like it. It feels almost like Omega, maybe in their metallurgy, used a lesser density type of metal to save weight. You get this, again, this very light feeling. I used to remember this watch being very heavy feeling. Now this is the Hesalite model, so again, that's going to save maybe a few grams, and I don't have two to compare, but I do have a scale. I can bring out the scale in a second. We can weigh a couple of these watches here. But it feels very light, and that's going to make it very comfortable feeling for what is otherwise a pretty sizable watch. Whereas if I hold this Speedmaster, yeah, that's heavy. You know, it's got the sapphire. It's got a non-tapering bracelet. All this, you know, machinery going into the clasp here. You know, if I can put this next to this, I mean, the size and the clasps are, I mean, this is a 20 mil clasp and this is 15, so it's pretty dramatic. I don't think anyone's weighed them, and I couldn't find any weight measurements, so let me grab the scale. Normally weigh food on this thing. Let's see what we got here. All right, so the Speedy, 124 grams with the Hesalite model, and I don't know, a dozen links taken out. I mean, the guy was really taking out a lot of links, and I had to do a little extra afterwards. By the way, one of the most frustrating bracelets to size. Not that it's hard, it is screws. Omega uses this annoying screw, and pin. Same thing on the Speedmaster. But man, this is, the links are so small, there's so many of them. They have like 4 or 5 different pieces. They just kind of flop and get all tangled, and your orientation goes crazy. So anyway, very annoying to size, but once you get it done, it should be done. So that was 124 grams. Let's see, 129 on the Rolex Explorer. So heavier, and I have links taken out of this one as well, but for a 39 millimeter watch, again, it is sapphire, but just, you know, a couple more grams there. And this is, you know, on the wrist, a smaller watch. And let's see this monster here. Yeah, 173. So this is like a boat anchor now. Not that that matters, but. So even though it's a 42 millimeter watch, I guess at least in the Hesalite version, it's pretty light, and because of that, very wearable, very wearable. I'll tell you, when I was comparing the two, what really made the difference for me between the Hesalite and the Sapphire Sandwich was the bracelet. I just did not care for the polished in-link portion right here on the Sapphire model. You know, the crystals, to me, I kind of am more of a purist, so I definitely, you know, like the idea of getting the Hesalite model. And I like the solid case back. The fact that it's, you know, less expensive also doesn't hurt. But I just didn't feel, honestly, I felt like, you know, there was pros and cons to both. You know, pro on this one being kind of more historically accurate and the price, obviously. And then the other one, you've got obviously a little bit more of a robust crystal setup. You've got the display back, which is nice to look at the movement with. But the con obviously being the price. But what really sold it for me was just the bracelet. I just didn't care for the polished links on the other bracelet. And that was kind of what tipped the scale in this one's favor. But I did try them both at the Omega Boutique where I live. So again, hopefully one of the first ones out there. And you know, I've got the chronograph running. I've just started timing it, so I'll see what kind of timekeeping it has. But you know, the other things I forgot to mention, step dial, which you really don't notice, to be quite honest. It shows up much more in pictures. Let's get it on camera here. I don't think I can center it here. But you know, it's got the step dial. It's got the redesigned chronograph hand. I'll even reset it here. It's got the dot over 90 tack, you know, whatever. To me, that's nonsense. And it's got, you know, a little different style pushers, kind of more like a piston style, which are nice. The crown's bigger, which is better for winding, although I found this when I was kind of setting the watch earlier to be kind of hard to get in and out. I don't remember about how that worked on the old one, but definitely a hard crown to push in and out. It's probably a good thing. And, you know, it doesn't feel overly big. I just don't know how to describe that, but it feels really good on the wrist. They've managed to make it thinner. Watches are going that direction where we want, you know, watches to be thinner. So this is I think a 13.7 millimeters thick. I don't have calipers here to compare anything else or the old model, but the old model was over 14, not by much. But yeah, you know, I'm really happy. Again, one of the first out of the gate, so kind of worked. I've been looking at this watch as soon as, you know, for you know, since the rumors began, and I've been interested in itching for a Speedy, and was about to get the old model at a substantial discount, new, and then all of a sudden they announced this on I think the Tuesday of this week, Speedy Tuesday, and then here it is Friday on my wrist. So couldn't be happier, and you know, I hope it runs well. You know, I'll keep you guys updated, and I'm sure there'll be a flood of interesting videos that'll hit the you know, the YouTube and other places on the internet that'll do a lot better job and have all those cool cameras and have cool accents and, you know, pictures of Neil Armstrong, I'm sure. But for me, just happy to be part of the game. So that's it. And maybe I'll do independent reviews on these watches and kind of tell you what I think. But for now, Nacarelli out.